Hello, everyone. I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Seizing Your Greatness, and I am so excited for our guest today. She's somebody that I've been talking to for quite some time, and this interview, this conversation has been waiting to happen for I don't even know how long. We've had so many postponements. So I am so excited that she is finally here. We are finally doing this, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Susan Ní Chríodáin. And I hope I said that right. She said that I wouldn't get it right and that would be okay. But hello, Susan.
That was absolutely spot on, Julianne. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Well,
That was all
welcome.
in months you had to practice.
I know, right? But that's how wonderful you are, is that it's one of those things. You and I are so similar in that we just believe in timing and everything. It's gonna work when it's gonna work, and it's okay if it doesn't work on our clock. So yay, we're finally here. So I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are and possibly something that we can't find out about you on the internet.
Hoo. What can't you find out about people on the internet these days?
Right?
So who am I? Oh, it's a question I ask myself quite a lot as well. But I'm a woman who lives in Oxford, who doesn't live in my where I grew up. I've left my home country, Ireland, more than 25 years ago now. I've lived around the world in several countries. So I'm a combination of global experiences. That's the way I think about who I am. And variety is something that I love as well.
Mm.
And something people don't know about me is I don't really like driving.
Fair enough. I've done so much driving. I'm not a huge fan of it myself, so I can relate to that, and I can also relate to leaving my home country because I have done that and lived in a couple of different countries myself. So that's something that's drawn me to you as well because I can relate to that global experience, and it's interesting. I never realized. I'm like, oh, that's why people don't like Americans until I lived abroad. And I love my home country and I'm proud to be American. Don't get me wrong, but I also, when you have different experiences, it's yeah, living in other countries makes a huge difference, I would say. Wouldn't you? I mean, what's your biggest shock?
The biggest shock I had, I would say, was coming home after living
Oh,
away. Yeah, which I found fascinating. The first country I lived and worked in was Australia. And that was back at the turn of the century. And it was English speaking, so it was easy. And,
mhm.
it's like going to the States, it's like going to England, Ireland. You the same kind of vibe, I guess, in a way. And then I went to live in Uganda in East Africa, and I spent 12 months in Uganda. And I remember getting back to Ireland, and my parents picked me up at the airport. And in Uganda, like everyone drove like maniacs. One of the reasons I don't like driving. And when you got to a roundabout, it was always about like head down and kind of just the biggest car won. Traffic lights didn't work and all of this scary stuff. And I remember my parents picking me up and we got to a set of traffic lights. And when it went green, my dad drove on and I was like, oh no, watch out, a car's going to come from somewhere. And I'd become so conditioned into a different way of living that I'd let go of some of the things that we take for granted where we grow up.
I love that. One of my experiences when I came back from Italy was I wasn't listening to people's conversations because I assumed I wouldn't understand what they were saying. I was like, oh, wait a second. I actually understand English.
It is funny, isn't it, how quickly we become socialized. And another time, I spent a couple of months in Sudan, and I went from Sudan to Pakistan. And during that time, I was covered up really
Yeah.
from there, below the elbows, below the knees. And I
Hmm.
remember my last night in Pakistan, I went to the UN club, and there was a woman there, and this is about 5 or 6 months now without seeing human flesh apart from my own.
Yeah.
There was a woman there who had like a stringy vest top on, and I was shocked. I wanted to go and give her my cardigan or something, cover her up. because I was so socialized that it wasn't acceptable. But it was okay. We were in an environment where it was acceptable in this club, but it wasn't day to day. And the shock was something else.
So how have you brought these experiences into your work? How has it affected how you lead?
I think for me, like I said earlier, variety is everything. And the more experiences we can have, the more we are able to deal with anything that comes our way. That's what I think. You've got your brain has more experiences to draw from. There's resilience in travel. There's all of that you get, that you have to make it where the language you don't understand and no one understands you, or you have to interact with different currencies, you have to interact with people of all walks of life, and you embody that. You just take it into you. And I think you don't really notice until you are in a situation where people are looking to a leader to do something, and you kind of go, well, I can step in here because I've been in uncertainty, or I've been in a conflict zone or a war zone, or I've responded to a natural disaster. So I can surely deal with a couple of people at work who don't know how to get on with one another or something like that. And I think you put things in context better. I think that that's what it's helped me do. And just brought more stories, because
Mhm.
your stories are not ones that people typically can predict either, because you're bringing in experiences from other places.
I love that too, because you definitely see things differently. And we get so stuck in the way things are in our day to day life that we only see certain solutions because that's what we're trained to look for. Same idea. And so I love this idea of adding in all these different experiences so that you can actually open your eyes more to what else is out there because you don't know what you don't know.
And that is even such a funny thing to say, isn't it? But it's so true, but you're
Yeah.
never going to know. And I think we have a fear often, don't we? We hold an anxiety around being somewhere else in a
Hmm.
country where we don't understand things. But what I realized, and maybe you saw this as well, Julie, is people are people
Yeah.
wherever you go. And they want the same things for their families, and they're going to be kind to you. And
Hmm.
that's the thing. Strangers are always incredibly kind, and you'll never be stuck anywhere. And
Yeah.
like I would feel, I remember when I was in Uganda and I came back to Ireland for a couple of months, or a month between my contracts, and I did a local or a recording for the newspaper, an interview for the newspaper. And they asked me, did I feel unsafe in Africa, war torn Africa? And I said, well, honestly, I felt more unsafe in some of the streets in Dublin. And the headline in the newspaper article when it went out was war torn Africa safer than Dublin.
Well, that's a hook.
But we do have this feeling that we're going to be safer at home in our
Hmm.
own country than we will be abroad. And I've found like people are so kind wherever you go,
Yeah.
and it adds to the experience.
I've had that exact experience, especially when I lived in Italy. Complete strangers were the ones that have always stepped up and stepped in when I needed somebody. And it's not that, the people in my life that I knew from back home weren't willing to do that, but it was 9 hours behind. So it's not like if I'm having a problem or an issue in real time, I don't have 9 hours to consult somebody because of what time it is, the time difference. So I love that. I've popped up your website a couple of different times leading beyond the numbers. And I'd love for us to have a little bit of a conversation about this book, this idea, how it came about, what inspired you, all the fun stuff. So whatever comes to your mind first, let's start with that.
Brilliant. So my first career, as I like to say, I trained as an accountant, and I loved numbers. So it was actually, and I was good at them, as we'd say in school. I was good at that, so I went for the numbers, and it was a solid career. It was a it was a good career choice. And I spent the first maybe 15 years or so working in accounting and finance. And when I went to work overseas, I think I just became more interested in people. And as I
Mhm.
moved up the ladder in my career as well, I spent a couple of years as a director of finance. And that became so much about relationships and less
Yeah.
about the numbers and bringing people with you. So I used to spend a lot of my time thinking beyond the numbers and how to get non numbers people in tune with what needed to be done. And it worked both ways. But I was way more interested in people than I was in the numbers and
Mhm.
how we work and how no formula. A balance sheet is a formula. Profit
Yeah.
and loss account, a formula. Anything you do with numbers, there's a formula. But people, there's no formula to how we individually work. And I love the intricacies of that. And so I got an opportunity to move sideways with work and move more into general management and leadership. And it just woke something up in me that
Mm.
this is really where I'm meant to spend my time. And I spent a number of years leading very senior individuals in their own right who didn't need a manager or a leader as such. They needed someone to have conversations with, to
Mhm.
explore how they were feeling, what was holding them back in their role, when they couldn't get a point across in a way that they wanted to, and so on. So I moved to the UK then after a number of years of living abroad,
Mhm.
and I became interested in how our brains work and how our bodies work more. And I came across the work of this scientist, neuroscientist, and psychologist, Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she talks about how emotions are made. And in her book, How Emotions Are Made, she draws on accounting language. So
Oh.
she talks about body budgeting, for example. So that's what your body's always doing. It's running a budget for your body. And I thought, oh, I could take this metaphor and this analogy and spread it. And I started talking about accounting for emotions and teasing it out, and then decided to write the book. Leading beyond the numbers, which I've got here with me, how accounting for emotions tips the balance at work. And the business is beyond the numbers. And then the podcast is life beyond the numbers. And they all kind of, and the numbers are matter. This is the thing to me. Numbers matter, but
Mhm.
people matter more. And one
Yeah.
guest said to me, remember this, Susan, one podcast guest is numbers don't make decisions. People do. And I
Ooh.
think that's the crux of it. That's what it all comes down to is, yeah, it's about the people.
It's interesting because I kind of think about what you're saying as kind of like accounting as being your home country and then everything else being living abroad and beyond the country, beyond the numbers. And it's kind of interesting because we feel like we're good at this, this is safe, I can do this. And yet you stepped out of that comfort zone and found something even more remarkable that spoke to your soul. And not that you've given up or thrown away all of your education, you're using it in another way, and I love that because it's next level.
And isn't that what they say? Is that, if we can make connections between all the things we do or see in our
Yeah,
lives, that we come up with new ideas or new ways of looking at things. And
yeah,
and I think that's, yeah, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we would
correct.
say. And I'm staying true to things. And I also wanted to take like feelings and emotions into the workplace and show people that they feel, and regardless of whether or not they think that. And I thought if I use the language of business and accounting to talk about feelings, maybe it might reach a few more people.
It's a great bridge, it makes it a little bit for people who are, because it seems to be, in my experience, is people who are analytical in general don't necessarily want to address the feelings. It's a little more woo woo. But if you can use language that feels safe and comfortable, then it feels a lot more doable, safe and comfortable. So I love this idea because it's once again that bridge. It's not an entirely different way of being. It's just like, oh, I can be all the things, not just one.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. We have so many identities, and we often settle into one identity and kind of let go of the others. And we think
Yeah,
feelings and emotions don't belong at work. However, we talk about engagement in the workplace and motivation and inspiration. They're all things we feel. We don't sit around
exactly.
saying, that person, if that person inspired me, it's because I felt something. Even if
Hmm.
I'm not conscious of the feeling. It's a different reaction, I think. And we also feel disengaged. I feel like don't want to be here. I feel like I'm going through the motions, that kind of way as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I've always kind of felt like I want to be a whole entire person, not just like this part of me here and this part of me here and this part of me here. And this idea of, oh, don't bring your home life to work. Excuse me, but you know, let me just forget my brain and my heart at home and then maybe. But if something is going on, it's going to affect us. And I feel like if we ignore that versus embracing it and acknowledging it and working through it while we can, I mean, I'm not saying you break down in tears while you're, in the middle of a board meeting, and that's not what I'm saying, but there is a time and a place, and maybe acknowledging the fact that you're giving your best would be a better way of going about it versus pretending like the rest of your soul doesn't matter and what's going on doesn't matter. I
And
don't know.
I think that's so interesting because often it's shining through anyway, Julianne. We can see people in a boardroom who they're going through something or there's something
Hmm.
going on or they don't want to be there. Our body language gives us away often. Even if we're trying to mask it, there's
Yeah.
the demeanor of people often gives away what they're thinking, not necessarily what they're thinking, but what they might be thinking. And the other thing, I suppose, is we never know what's going on in someone else's life. And oftentimes people are carrying huge weight into the office with them, huge
Hmm.
demands from the outside world, huge criticism or self criticism. And we just don't see that on the outside. If they have a broken leg or a broken arm,
We could see
we'll feel
that.
for them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking about when I used to work in addiction recovery, and I was going through a loss. I've lost a lot of people, unfortunately, some to addiction, but mostly not. But when I'm at work, it's not about me, it's about the clients and them trying to save their own lives. So I remember just going into the bathroom every so often and crying, just letting it all out, putting myself back together and going back out and acting like I was perfectly fine. And nobody even noticed. They knew something was going on, but they were, I didn't make it about me, but I still honored those feelings when they came out. I like scheduled time to open up the tap and let out some of the, sadness and then close it back up again. So I just think about that because I was still affected. I was honoring myself because, we're just as important as everybody else. So why can't we honor ourselves while we're helping to honor others? So
And the only time we won't be feeling something is when we're dead. So it's a
exactly.
vital sign of life. And at the end of the day, it's just information as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes what we're feeling isn't actually true. There's just, we might feel scared because we heard a sound, but
Yeah.
actually maybe the sound was nothing to be scared of. So the
Exactly.
information is something to then go and investigate with. And that's data, just like numbers.
Yeah, exactly. No, I really like that. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and where we can find it and what it's about and the type of guests you have, all the fun stuff.
So, Life Beyond the Numbers, it can be found anywhere you listen to your podcast, pretty much, I think. And it's about how to create a more fulfilling work life.
Mm.
And I have a whole range of guests. I like to talk to people who care about people and people
Mhm.
who've got a story to tell, much like you're doing, I guess, Julianne, And like the most recent podcast episode that went out is with a guy called Angelo Vermeulen, who was a NASA commander on a simulation of going into space to see how people would survive in space, on all about the bio kind of organic side of growing things and feeding people and the biology of space and everything. And he was just fascinating guest. And then
Hmm.
I might talk to a leader who's working in an organization, and I talk to a lot of people who have moved from a corporate career or a career within an organization and have gone out on their own. And I suppose the thing I've learned from having these conversations is, at some point, if we've let go of our creativity or what feeds our soul, that comes back. And it's incredible the range of people and how we all have this spark in us. And when you find that thing that lights you up and you pursue that, it just shows. And they're the type of guests I love to have on.
Creativity. That is one of my requirements for for life, because you talk about not wanting everything to be exactly the same and different experiences, and for me, a part of that is that creativity. And the interesting thing too is the more I get into what I do, which is a lot more technical because I'm in media, uh, but that doesn't it's like numbers. There's creativity in numbers as well. And even if you think about art and geometry and nature, everything is numbers. So once again, it's marrying the two and realizing that it's not either or. It's kind of like God or science. No, it's both. Creativity and numbers. So I'm just curious too. What would you say is one of your all-time favorite stories of being able to help somebody bridge that creativity into the workplace? Because I think especially the higher up we go in our careers, if we're working with and for somebody else, we tend to get kind of caught in the minutia of the day to day. How do we bring that creativity back? And what's one of your favorite stories about that?
I think it's often when I work with groups and everybody, especially if they're focused on a problem, people
Yeah.
want to tackle the problem with the
Mhm.
solution immediately. And it's often about helping people stand back to see that if you understand the problem,
Mhm.
then you can spend time, the solution will fall out of that. Because everybody, we're kind of drawn to just the solution and the creativity of the solution, but often the problem is misunderstood. And so I give people time and I say to them, right, you've got 45 minutes now to go away,
Mhm.
really unpack the problem. And there has to be a bit of creativity around that as well, because people have to let go of what they think the problem is. And I say every time you go to the solution, you've got to stop yourself as well and come back and think about what the problem is. Why are we here? Why was this a problem
Mhm.
for you? And it may not be the most creative thing, but sometimes just getting people to not think the same way
That's
opens up
creative.
the creativity. And then when
Yeah.
you get to the solution, it's much easier.
To me, it's almost like a puzzle. It's kind of like I
Like
always
the
find that
nine dot,
fascinating.
the nine dot puzzle. I often use
Yeah.
that at the beginning to illustrate, look, there's more than one way to do this. This might not be the
Ex
way you think.
exactly. Well, we have about a minute left. So I'm just curious, is there anything you wish I would have asked you that you would love to share or maybe reiterate something?
I suppose I'm thinking about going forward, Julianne, and I was looking at your the motto, kind of, greatness isn't born, it's
Mhm.
seized. And I've been thinking about that because we have this phrase, leaders aren't born, they're made. Or leaders
Mhm.
aren't made, well, I can't remember which way around it goes after that one. Leaders are born, not made. That's
Yeah.
it. And I've been thinking a lot about, well, where do I go? What's my next evolution? And I've been thinking about felt leadership as opposed to
Mm.
thought leadership. And the phrase I was coming up with in the last few days is leadership is felt, not made. Because
Oh,
there's
I love
something
that.
about how we, when we see a leader in the world, how do they make us feel? And when we
Mhm.
see a leader at work, how do they make us feel? But also as a leader,
Mhm.
there's an experience of leadership that you feel.
Oh, true. I love that. That's so beautiful. Oh, Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so quick, and I can't believe it took us this long to get this far, but here we are. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation, Julianne, and it's been a pleasure.
Oh, for us as well. And for those that are watching, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back again next Thursday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week.